I'm Ed Gemmell, so I'm the leader of the Climate Party. We launched on the 5th of September last year, on the same day as Liz Truss took office. And I know the joke's getting old, but we have already survived one Prime Minister. And we're going to be standing in the general election in 110 seats. So it'll be the 100 most marginal seats of the major parties to press them on climate action and get the right level of climate action. And then we're going to stand against the Net Zero Scrutiny Group in all of their seats as well. Just want to compliment Gemmel actually and the team at Steve Baker on actually the success that they've already had. I mean, Steve Baker has already left as a trustee of the Global Warming Policy Foundation, of course, which is based behind us. And I think that can come down to the pressure that the Steve Baker Watch put on him. And he really, really noticed it. I mean, he's been... He's been on the television talking about how he's suffering. We don't want anybody to suffer mentally, but I think he's feeling the pressure and the error of his ways on a lot of the stuff he's been doing, and that's been shown by a lot of local residents who are getting out there and telling it, as it is. Now, on the first day that Steve Baker Watch had its campaign, and Gemma had got the assembled crew outside, amazingly, I offered a meeting to Steve Baker. He already knew that I was supporting the Steve Baker Watch, and I offered a meeting to him. Bizarrely, he chose the moment that the Steve Baker Watch started as being the moment he would meet me. So there I was going into the office to meet him at the moment the vigil was starting outside. And I went in and we chatted, and we actually had, unbelievably, a chat for about an hour and a half. Can you believe that? An MP would give you an hour and a half. That would almost suggest that the effect the Steve Baker Watch was having on before it even got really started. During that discussion, we talked about what he thought about the climate emergency. And we had the X and Y axis, if you can imagine it, with urgent up one side and important along the other side. And then we both placed the Ukraine war right at the top on the urgent and important side. And then I said to Steve, okay, Steve, so now where would you place the climate crisis? And he put it down at the other end, on the unimportant and not urgent side. So that suggests the way that Steve has been viewing the climate crisis and the way that he's thinking of taking no action in the near future. Now, in fact, I already met Steve before. When I had an ecological conversion in June 2019. I mean, it was really, really, really very sudden, and basically involved actually my kids in a dream fighting in wars in Europe to stop people getting the drinking water so that we in Britain could keep having it and keep living in the luxury lifestyles that we have. And that was a moment that I woke up and just started working on climate change, and I hadn't been working on it, at least not very much, prior to that. And I stood in the 2019 general election just knowing nothing about politics and very little about climate, and I was against Steve Baker. I didn't even know who he was until I turned up to the first hustings. But what I did is I changed that whole election into a discussion about climate and biodiversity. So every hustings, every debate, everything that was said, we were arguing and discussing about environmental, and give due to my Green Party, the Green Party candidate was there as well. He joined in, and we had the whole thing focused around that, which was very uncomfortable for Steve. We thought we might have converted him, but clearly we didn't, and he seems to have slipped back. His reporting, let's say, in terms of how unimportant that the climate emergency crisis is, he then also has come reportedly and talked about me, and he's been asked about me several times in the constituency, and this is only reports, I've not heard him say it to my face, but he's called me apparently a child abuser, that I'm out frightening children by what I'm letting them know about. Well, is it frightening to the children to tell them about the truth? Is it frightening to let them know how it's really coming? Steve's belief is that we should be focusing on the worst emissions pathway that the IPCC has identified, and then seeing if that's very likely. Of course it isn't very likely, because that's not the one they're suggesting is really going to happen. But if we're looking at the real results of the don't worry, we'll do it without, that's fine. Okay. But if we're looking at the real results of the IPCC, then in Assessment Report 6, which they brought out at COP26, they looked at the new carbon budgets. They increased them from AR5, which is 6 or 7 years before. But even with those increased carbon budgets, the carbon budget for staying at 1.5 degrees will run out in 2028. So gone completely, turn the lights off, shut the factory doors. So Steve, is it frightening to the children to tell them that we have to take that action now and that we can't wait, and that the science is telling us we must do it immediately? No, Steve, it isn't. It's telling them the truth, and it's giving them agency in the game as well. It's not just that.
When Steve Baker and Lord Frost and Jacob Rees-Mogg and McKinley, they all talk about us being poorer because of climate. We've got to take action on climate. It's going to make us poorer. All the poor people won't be able to heat their homes. Rubbish! The entire planet is going in this direction. 150 countries have already set net zero targets. That's the direction of travel. We're all going there anyway. So what we should be doing is getting our leaders and our politicians up there saying, let's get at the front. Let's get on 2030. Let's take first mover, and we'll see Britain benefiting from it as we also solve the climate crisis. Let's not talk about this rubbish about us being poorer. It'll actually be good for our prosperity if we get going, and worse if we go at 2050, and then we'll have to pay the Chinese for our solar panels. Yeah. And 2050 net zero. Well, you've heard of greenwash. That is utter hogwash. Utterly ridiculous. Why we would ever pick that as a target is rubbish. From outdated science at the time it came out, from compromise politically, it was always the wrong target. But right now with the latest report, with Antonio Guterres even saying, finally getting off the fence himself, and saying it must be 2040 for all developed countries, but it isn't. Based on the science, it's definitely 2030 or earlier, and that's the direction of travel we need to go in. Now, Caroline said quite rightly, let's keep the fossil fuels in the ground. Absolutely, let's keep them in the ground, not just because of safety, but because it's better for us. We'll make more money doing it a different way. They're expensive. Renewables are cheaper. So let's get on and do it in the decarbonised, sustainable way, and it will actually be better for us economically as well. I'm just smiling, looking at some of the signs on Tufton Street with the fire. Greta Thunberg came out with quite a famous statement. President Macron said it as well. And they both said that our house is on fire. Well, yes, our house is on fire. And we're just waking up. We're going into the next room, we're grabbing our loved one, we know there's a fire, and we're trying in the smoke, we're going downstairs, we're holding them, and we're getting down to the front door. But the front door is locked. And then we're going into the living room. We'll get out that way. But we go in there and we try the windows, and the windows are locked. So that's the moment when we turn around to face the fire. And it's the only chance we have now is to put the fire out. So we turn on the taps, we throw blankets over it, we empty the plant pots on it. And if we are lucky, we manage to put it out. But we're left with a blackened, charcoal home that we then have to start putting right, cleaning, and turning into somewhere we can inhabit again. So they're absolutely right that our house is on fire, but there's no way out of this house, and we have to find the way forward now that is going to get us out of it and get us out of it quickly. But we don't have to look at that as a downside. There can be an upside. Economically, we can lead, and it can be good for us. And at the same time, we have cleaner air and better places to live. But we need to stop these people funding the stuff that's preventing us getting there. Yeah. We need to get real leadership. I work, and I'm the managing director of Scientists Warning Europe. And Scientists Warning Europe at COP26, or Scientists Warning, in the last warning to humanity, it said, what we need to do now is we need to stop worrying about the scientists. The scientists can't shout louder in bolder font. It's now about leadership, and that's what we need today.